I'd like to please introduce to you Ms. Jane Turner, who will be speaking on the healing power of writing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming this afternoon. I know there's a lot of choice at the conference, and I do feel very, very blessed that you've chosen to come into this room. And of course, there will have been a reason that you come. So when I start to wrap up, please let me know if there's anything that I haven't covered that you were hoping I would. But I guess it's a fairly open topic that I'm talking about, the power of healing through writing. And I'm going to share a little bit of my story with you, because ultimately what I did find from writing my own life story down was that at the end of the day, it's our stories that connect us. And what I may not see in myself that you see in me is a reflection of yourself that you may not see in you. And that's, I guess, another way of saying that really we are all essentially one, if you like, or certainly more the same than many of us in the West in particular have been brought up to believe. But look, my journey was like this. I was born in Sydney. I wasn't actually born in Sydney. I live in Sydney, Australia. I was born in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. It's not nearly as well known as Sydney, but that was my place where I came into the world. And it was pretty much a one-industry town. And that industry was government. That was where the parliament is. That's where all of the government departments supporting all of the laws and all of the regulations of the country were. And so I was brought up in a family of public servants. And I worked my whole life up to the age of 52 in a government job. I moved from Canberra to Sydney, but still kept a government job because that was kind of the way I worked. It was what I knew, it was what was familiar, and for me, the value of safety was really very important. Security, I suppose, is a better way to put it, was very important to me. Well, what happened to me then at 52 was that my security blanket was pulled out completely from under me because the organisation that I worked for had to shed about a third of its workforce, and I was one of those people. Now, at that time in my life, it was like a perfect storm. So I'd lost my job, I'd gone into menopause, I was cranky, I was sleeping badly, I was feeling, generally very, very poorly, and my daughter had gone into adolescence as well. So we had this kind of perfect storm, certainly in terms of the hormones in the house, but in terms of the stress level, I was through the roof. Now, whilst I say that I had worked in a government job my whole life, I had also, reasonably late in my career, started a small coaching practice because I realised that what I really enjoyed in my job, where I managed a lot of people, I enjoyed helping people develop and grow and go beyond where they might have otherwise thought they could go. And I thought, look, I'll get some training in this because I would really enjoy being better at doing that. So when the time came for me to realise that at 52, certainly in a country like Australia, it's not so easy for a woman, frankly for anybody, but for a woman to get a job. And I applied for many, I got none of them, and to this day I'm actually grateful for that, but at the time I was not. So I had to really think on my feet, and what I decided to do was write a book to build my profile, my credibility, my authority, to make myself more visible to my potential coaching clients. And in a way, what happens when we write a book, we call it the halo effect. And that is that people then believe a whole lot of things about us that may or may not be true. Let me ask you, if you know that somebody's an author, what do you think about them? Do you think they're smart? Do you think they are right? Do you think that they know everything about the subject that they've written about? Well, this appears to be the case. Certainly, I saw myself make a decision. This was way before any of this happened to me, but I really clearly remember once that I made a decision to see a naturopath who was an hour and a half drive from where I lived. And the commitment I needed to make was every fortnight for 6 months to see that naturopath. And I only made the decision to go to that naturopath because she had written a book. There were so many naturopaths who were close to where I lived, but this was the woman who had built a bridge to me through the fact that I felt that I could trust her and that she was the go-to person. So I figured, look, I'm going to write a book on menopause, and that's what I did. And sure enough, a lot of people are now contacting me because they've heard of me. I'm only at this conference because of my book. I was tracked down because of my book. Otherwise, you know, how would I have been here? Who would have known about me? So on the one hand, I can put my hand on my heart and say that there have been massive benefits in terms of my business by writing a book. But what I didn't expect was the massive amount of healing that I got in terms of writing my story down. And it wasn't just about writing it down, but it was also about sitting in any discomfort and just sitting there and realising at the end that as much as I might have wanted to sanitise my story and not talk about my deepest, darkest, most shameful secrets, there was something compelling me to do that. And the something compelling me, I guess it's called integrity and authenticity. And ultimately, I now can see that I was ready to own my whole story, you know, to really fully be who I am and not to just play my life out in front of the curtain. And by the curtain, what I mean is I want you to imagine that I'm on a stage right now and that perhaps that screen is the curtain. In our own subconscious mind, we will have a curtain, and there are things that we're quite happy to have playing out in front of the curtain, and then there's a whole lot of stuff behind the curtain that we don't want to own. It might be things like selfishness, you know, qualities that we just don't like. It might be selfishness. It might be laziness, slothfulness, gluttony, you know, we could name the sins, but those kind of things that we don't want to be associated with, we don't want to own, yet we all have these things as part of our nature, and I now know that actually denying our shadow is A, exhausting, and B, unsustainable over time. So for me, the relief at finally coming to terms with the fact that owning, as I say, my deepest, darkest, most shameful secret, which was about being a binge eater. And I had suffered from binge eating disorder for the best part of 40 years. Now, how could I imagine that I could write about my experience of menopause and how I recognised something, for example, that as soon as I stopped eating processed food, for 5 days, my hot flushes stopped. You know, how could I think that that was the whole story and that that was okay to tell that? You know, why was it difficult for me to stop eating processed foods? You know, because sugar is one of the most addictive substances in the world, and that I had trained my body's reward system to respond to sugar, in particular processed foods as well. So, you know, this is the journey that I came through, and I was trying not to have to call it what it was. I was saying all sorts of things in the drafts of my book, that it was, sugar dependency, or that it was comfort eating. It was not. It was binging. And it was binging because that was the skill that I had learned to push my emotions away. And I learnt at the age of 45, I learnt through my coaching training and through a process that I now help my clients experience, you know, or overcome any difficulties, or at least see what their difficulties are before they can even start to overcome them, is neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. So through NLP, I was able to realise that I was a surviving twin in a case of vanishing twin syndrome. So that experience in the womb taught me to not feel my emotions, because my emotions were way, way, way too painful for a little being like that. So having some compassion for myself, I learned compassion in writing my story down. I learned perspective, and I stepped into that story, and in stepping into that story and making it public, very public. I've been on television, I've been in magazines, I've been on podcasts. I talk about this everywhere because, again, sharing our stories, we connect. None of us are perfect, but none of us are broken. And I believed I was broken. I believed I was worthless. And I believed that the only way I could really, you know, go through my life and face up to myself in the mirror was to keep all of that stuff I didn't like behind the curtain. But in fact, really, the only way I can live my life, I now can't imagine not living the life I lead now, because I feel real and I feel whole and I feel like I'm connected to everybody because of the fact that I'm not hiding. Because when I was hiding, I was connecting to nobody, and it was very, very, very lonely. So first piece of healing was through that whole just owning it, and then all of the sting went out of it, all of the power went out of it. So that alone was huge for me. The other part of it, well, not completely unrelated, but let's call it unrelated at the moment, was that because of the circumstances of my gestation and my birth in particular, because my mother almost died with blood clot going to the lungs. So I had the initial, if you want to call it abandonment from the twin, then abandonment from my mother because she was in the emergency ward. I can hardly hold that against her, but I never bonded with her when she was alive. I never bonded at all. And when I was writing my book, of course, about menopause, and I was writing about my options for handling menopause versus her options for handling menopause decades earlier. And I spoke about the fact that in her day, of course, prescriptions for synthetic hormones were handed out like, you know, bus tickets. And she paid the price in terms of getting breast cancer and ultimately dying from breast cancer. But she was given a drug called tamoxifen, which is still used to this day, and it can buy people usually 5 years. Breast cancer patients in particular can buy you 5 years. It bought Mum 5 years. And that gave her enough time to have a year with my daughter, and it gave my daughter enough time to have a year with her grandmother. And when I wrote that in my book, my heart just opened. It just opened, and I bonded. And not only did I just bond with my mother, but I bonded with my daughter in a very different way, in a much deeper, much more profound way. So this is why I'm all about, you know, writing. So I help people write their books if they want to build their profile and credibility and develop their businesses. That's great. And I also help people just with writing to get the kind of healing that I got. And that's what I'm so happy to have been told, to be able to tell you about today, because you've come into this room for some reason, and I hope I've covered that off for you. Is there anything that anybody wants to ask me to talk about further than this? And we've only got a couple of minutes, so if not, that's all good too. Yes, quick one.
Quick question. I've done a little bit of subconscious writing, and that's physical writing.
Yes.
But yes, typing, how do you go about this? Is this part of the healing when you type it up?
You can type it up. You can type it up. It is certainly a different experience. I love taking people into a meditation, and then as they come out, they're just writing, because that coordination is different. But also just typing it, because it's just about documenting your story. That's a really good place to start, and it doesn't matter how you do it. But yes, the whole handwriting thing is another whole dimension to it.
Since your book was mainly autobiographical,
Yes.
before you actually came out with it, was there any hesitation on your part? Was there anything holding you back?
Absolutely. There were so many things holding me back, and it was about overcoming those things. They were all up here. Overcoming all of those things about what if nobody reads it, what if they don't like it, what if they think I'm showing off, and you know, what about if people think I'm wrong? That whole thing of, yes, potentially being wrong, and the fear around that was huge, really, really huge. And again, being prepared to own what it is. I'm here right now, right here, right now, and this is what I have to offer. That's a really big journey I've been on, a really big journey. And I have to get off really quickly, but I just want to commend to you guys, if you are not familiar with the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, go onto YouTube, put in the words hero's journey, and a fabulous TED Ed talk will come up. And my whole journey of writing my first book was clearly a hero's journey. And if you put any of your adversity or any challenges you're having and watch the hero's journey and think, oh look, this is what's going on. It's not that I'm not able to do this, it's just that I haven't crossed that threshold yet, you know? Yeah, so I hope this has been helpful to everybody. I've certainly enjoyed talking to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane.